If you're gearing up for any competitive exam in India, there's a topic you absolutely have to master: the Directive Principles of State Policy, or DSPS. Now, these aren't just some dusty ideals. They are literally the conscience of our Constitution, and let me tell you, a goldmine for exam questions. So let's break down exactly what you need to know to ace this section.
So, to really get why the directive principles even exist, we need to hop in a time machine and go back to 1947. Just imagine the incredible, monumental task facing the makers of our Constitution. They weren't just writing a rule book, They were trying to design a social revolution from scratch. How do you guide a brand new nation facing crushing poverty and inequality toward a future of justice for all? That was the core problem they needed to solve.
And the answer they came up with? Well, it was brilliant. The Directive Principles of State Policy, the DPSPs. You'll find them in Part 4 of the Constitution, and you can think of them as a set of instructions, a moral compass for all future governments. And what's the ultimate goal? To go beyond just political freedom and actually build a real social and economic democracy.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the absolute basics of what these principles are. Then, we're going to dive deep into the three main categories you hear about all the time: socialist, Gandhian, and liberal intellectual. After that, we'll see how these ideas actually get applied in the real world. And hey, make sure you stick around to the end, because we're going to cover some special directives that are outside of Part 4, and that's where those tricky, high-scoring questions often hide.
Okay, first things first. Let's really understand the fundamental nature of these principles. What makes them so different from, say, fundamental rights? Their role is totally unique, and getting this difference right is the first major step to mastering this whole topic.
This slide right here, this is probably the single most important distinction you need to burn into your brain. Think of it like this. Fundamental rights are like a stop sign for the government. They're justiciable, which is a fancy way of saying you can march right into court if they're violated. They are negative commands. DSPPs, on the other hand, are more like a ghost sign, or maybe a GPS navigator. They're positive instructions, telling the state where it should be heading. But, and this is the key, you can't sue the government for taking a scenic route. This difference is a classic exam question, so make sure you've got it down.
And that's exactly why this quote from Granville Austin is so perfect. He called them the conscience of the Constitution. Think about it. A conscience guides you to do the right thing, right? But you can't be thrown in jail just for ignoring it. That nails their role perfectly. They are a moral command, not a legal one.
All right, let's jump into the first category, the socialist directives. At their very heart, these principles are all about building a welfare state and tackling that social and economic injustice head-on.
Let's look at the heavy hitters here. For Article 38, the key word to remember is minimize inequality. Article 39 is a big one. For this, remember equitable resources and, crucially, equal pay for equal work. That clause gets tested all the time. Article 41, that connects to ideas of Social Security, things like unemployment benefits. And Article 42 is all about ensuring humane work conditions and maternity relief. Together, these articles really form the foundation of India's social safety net.
Okay, pencils up, highlighters out. This is a major exam alert. The 42nd Amendment Act of 1976. It was passed during the emergency and is so massive it's often called a mini-constitution. It was absolutely instrumental in beefing up the socialist character of the DPSPs. You will almost certainly see questions about this, so pay close attention.
So what exactly did it add? 4 absolute game changers. Article 39A on free legal aid, to make sure justice isn't just for those who can afford it. Article 43A, which introduced worker participation, giving labor a voice in management. And Article 48A, which, for the first time, made environmental protection a constitutional goal. These 4 are high yield points for any exam. You have to have them memorized.
Next up, let's move to the principles that were directly inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. Here, the focus kind of shifts from the top-down state to the grassroots. It's all about decentralization and empowering villages from the bottom up. And in this category, Article 40 is the undisputed star of the show. It calls for organizing village panchayats, a dream that eventually became a reality thanks to the 73rd and 74th Amendments. Then you have Article 43, which champions cottage industries to support rural life. And of course, Articles 47 and 48 reflect those core Gandhian ideas on public health and animal welfare. And hey, just like with the socialist principles, there's another key amendment you need to flag here. This time, it's the 97th Amendment from 2011, which added a new principle right in line with Gandhian thinking, focused on cooperative societies.
And this is it, Article 43B. Its whole purpose is to strengthen the cooperative movement, which is so central to that Gandhian ideal of economic self-sufficiency at the local level. Make sure you remember this article, as exam questions often love to test us on the more recent amendments.
Okay, on to our final category. This bucket contains principles that really reflect the ideals of modern liberalism. These are about creating a rational, uniform, and progressive legal and social framework for the entire country.
And in here, we find some of the most forward-looking and, honestly, most debated principles. Article 44, calling for a uniform civil code. That's a constant in the news, right? Article 45 focuses on early childhood education. Article 50 is an absolute pillar of our democracy, demanding a separation of the judiciary from the executive. And Article 51 basically outlines India's foreign policy DNA, our commitment to international peace.
So, right about now, you might be thinking, okay, if you can't enforce these in court, do they actually matter? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. They matter a whole lot. Let's take a look at how these guiding principles have actually shaped the laws and policies we live with today.
This is where the rubber meets the road. That call for humane work conditions back in Article 42, that wasn't just a vague suggestion. It led directly to things like the Maternity Benefit Act. That promise of equal justice in Article 39A, boom, it became a reality with the National Legal Services Authority. That duty to protect the environment in Article 48A, well, that gave us the Wildlife Protection Act. These principles are not just words on a page. They are the DNA that's coded into India's most important laws.
And this brings us full circle, because even though Article 37 is the one that says DSPSs are non-justiciable, it also explicitly states, and this is key, that they are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it is the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. And as we've just seen, the evidence is clear. They have.
All right, for those of you aiming for the top marks, here's that bonus section I promised. See, not all directives are neatly tucked away in Part 4. There are a few others scattered throughout the Constitution, and knowing them can give you a serious edge. These are 3 really important ones to know. Article 335 directs the state to consider the claims of scheduled castes and tribes when it comes to government jobs. Article 350A is a directive for states to provide primary education in the mother tongue for linguistic minorities. And Article 351 gives the Union a directive to promote the Hindi language. Knowing these little gems is what separates the top scorers from everyone else. So, let's quickly lock in the key takeaways. Number 1. DPSPs are the socio-economic soul of our Constitution. 2. They are non-justiciable, but they are the fundamental playbook for how the country should be run. 3. Remember the 3 main flavors: socialist, Gandhian, and liberal intellectual. And 4. They're not just theory, they are the actual blueprint behind many of India's biggest laws. Got it? Awesome. And we'll end on a question to get you thinking. Article 44, the Uniform Civil Code, is the perfect example of a directive principle that remains a powerful, deeply contentious, and so far unfulfilled ideal. It really highlights this ongoing journey of translating the Constitution's conscience into cold, hard law. So what do you think? Is this the future? Something to ponder on. Thanks for joining this explainer, and we'll see you in the next one.